I want you to imagine something, not a hypothetical, something real, something that has happened to millions of human beings across history, and that may have happened to you. Imagine waking up one morning, and the thing you spent years building is gone. It doesn't matter what the thing is, the career, the business, the relationship, the savings, the reputation you built from nothing and watched over years of careful work becomes something you could stand behind. Gone, not diminished, not damaged, gone. The question that every human being who has ever stood in the ash of what they built has had to answer is this. Now what? Most of what the modern world offers in that moment is almost insultingly inadequate. Motivational phrases, the instruction to bounce back, the well-meaning advice that everything happens for a reason, offered by people who have not, at that particular moment, lost everything. What I want to offer you today is something different. Not comfort, not slogans. A philosophy, a tested 2,000-year-old technology for not just surviving the ash, but for understanding what the ash actually is and what it makes possible. The Stoic reset is not about returning to what you had. It is about building something that has never existed before, from materials to fire revealed. Welcome back to Stoic Compass. Before we go into the philosophy, before we go into the specific tools and the specific practices, I want to say something that most content about resilience and starting over consistently fails to say. Loss is real. The pain of having something taken or collapsed or ended or burned away is not a problem to be bypassed on the way to the inspirational conclusion. It is not weakness. It is not an obstacle to the philosophy. It is the starting point of the philosophy. The Stoics were not people who never lost anything. Seneca was exiled twice from Rome. He lost his father, his son, friends, his freedom. He was eventually ordered to take his own life by the student he had spent years educating. Marcus Aurelius buried multiple children. He governed during the most devastating plague in Roman history. He watched trusted people betray him. He spent a decade of his reign on military campaigns in conditions of brutal, grinding difficulty. Epictetus was born into slavery. His master deliberately broke his leg. He spent the first years of his philosophical development as the legal property of another human being. These were not people who philosophized about loss from positions of safety. They philosophized from the middle of it, and what they developed, what the Stoic reset draws on, is a philosophy that was genuinely, specifically, repeatedly tested against the worst that life could deliver. Today, we apply that philosophy to your situation. Whatever the ash looks like, whatever the loss was, whatever the fire took. Lesson 1. The illusion of ownership. You never owned it, and that's the liberation. The deepest pain of losing something is almost always the feeling of having been robbed. The career didn't just end. It was taken. The relationship didn't just conclude. It was destroyed. The business didn't just fail. Something that was yours was removed from you. The feeling of theft is real, and it generates a specific quality of suffering. The suffering of violated ownership that sits on top of the original loss like a second wound. Epictetus, who understood the violation of ownership at the most literal possible level, having been a person who was legally owned by another, made an observation that cuts directly into this pain. He wrote in the Enchiridion, "Never say of anything, I have lost it, but I have returned it. Is your child dead? It is returned. Is your wife dead? She is returned. Is your estate taken away? Well, and is not that likewise returned?" When you first encounter this, it can feel cold, possibly even cruel. A philosopher telling you not to grieve. But read it again, slowly, with the specific context of Epictetus' own life. A man who was owned. A man who had not even his own body as a genuine possession. He is not saying, don't feel the loss. He is saying something far more radical. What you thought you owned, you were always only holding. The Stoic classification of all external things as preferred indifference. Things worth pursuing, worth caring for, worth protecting, but not constitutive of your deepest self, is not a diminishment of their value. It is a clarification of the nature of the relationship. A relationship of stewardship rather than ownership, of holding rather than possessing. And here is the liberation buried in this clarification. If you never owned it, if it was always on loan, then losing it is not a theft. The loan has ended. The terms were always temporary. And the borrower, you, remain. What you are, most essentially, your character, your values, your capacity for thought and action and care and growth, was never part of the loan. It was never at risk. The fire cannot reach it. The Buddhist tradition makes the same observation through the teaching of anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. Everything that is form will eventually lose that form. Every structure, every relationship, every accumulation of success, all of it is in motion, all of it impermanent, none of it finally secure. The monk who has genuinely absorbed this teaching does not experience impermanence as a source of grief. They experience it as a source of clarity, a clarity that allows genuine appreciation of what is here, without the shadow of the desperate grip that treats impermanence as an enemy. The first step of the Stoic reset is this recognition, not performed, not intellectually acknowledged, but genuinely absorbed. The loan has ended. You remain. And what remains is everything that actually matters. Lesson 2. The dichotomy of crisis. The morning after building the lighthouse. Let me describe the specific mental state of the morning after a significant collapse. Because if you've been there, you know it. And if you haven't been there, the description is important. Because nothing in most people's ordinary psychological toolkit is adequate for what that morning actually requires. The morning after is characterized by a specific quality of cognitive chaos. Every fear presenting itself simultaneously. The financial implications and the social implications and the identity implications all arriving at once. All demanding processing. All generating anxiety that compounds rather than resolves. The mind that tries to think its way through all of it simultaneously, to solve the crisis in its entirety in the first 48 hours, invariably makes it worse. Not because the problems aren't real, but because the cognitive state of simultaneous overwhelm is specifically the state in which clear thinking, precise decision-making, and effective action are least available. Epictetus' dichotomy of control, the foundational Stoic tool, is most powerful not as an abstract philosophical principle, but as a morning after crisis protocol. Here is the practice in its most concrete form. Take a piece of paper. Draw a line down the center. On the left side, write everything about the current situation that cannot be changed, the loss that has already occurred, the decisions that have already been made, the things that other people did or said or chose, the economic conditions, the market conditions, the external factors that combine to produce this outcome. Write it all down, every bit of it. Don't minimize it. Don't rush past it. And then, this is the crucial move. Draw a line under the left column. And at the bottom of that line, right? These things are not mine to change. They are not the arena of my action. I am releasing the energy I have been spending fighting them. On the right side, write everything about the current situation that is genuinely, actually, today available to your influence. The quality of the next conversation you have. The decision you make about how to spend the next 3 hours. The care you take of your body. What you eat, whether you sleep, whether you move. The story you tell about what happened. The choice about whether to look for what is still available or to stay fixated on what is no longer. The right column is almost always shorter than the left. The genuinely controllable is a narrower category than the genuinely uncontrollable, and it is the only category that matters. Marcus Aurelius, governing in the middle of simultaneous crisis, wrote this specifically as a morning discipline. Confine yourself to the present, not as a spiritual aspiration, as a practical instruction. When the mind is flooded with the past, what went wrong, and the future, what might go further wrong. The present, the only arena where action is possible, is inaccessible. The dichotomy exercise brings you back to the present. By sorting what is finished, the left column, from what is available, the right column, it creates the cognitive clarity from which effective action becomes possible. The morning after requires this exercise, not once daily, for as long as the crisis is active. Every morning, left column, right column. Every morning, release the left, inhabit the right. Lesson 3, a more fatty and the blank canvas. The superpower you know you had. Here's the truth about starting over that almost no one tells you. And it is a truth that is only available to someone who has genuinely lost something. Not theoretically available, experientially available, only from this specific position. Starting from zero is terrifying, and it is also one of the most specific advantages a human being can have. I am not being falsely optimistic. I am making a philosophical argument that I want you to examine carefully, because it requires a specific precision of the Stoic tradition to make it fully clear. When you have built something and it stands, when the career is established, the business is profitable, the relationships are stable, the reputation is intact, you are not free. You are bound by the expectation of maintaining what exists, bound by the social investment in your continued success, bound by the identity you constructed around what you built, the identity that makes certain risks impossible, certain pivots unthinkable, certain honest reckonings too threatening to undertake. You cannot easily rebuild the foundation when the building is standing on top of it, but when the building is burned, the foundation is exposed, visible, examinable in a way it has not been since before the construction began. Nietzsche, who developed the concept of a more fatty that Stoicism anticipated, described this as the ultimate test. My formula for greatness in a human being is a more fatty, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. Love the fire, not as masochism, not as a performance of positivity in the face of genuine loss, but as a deliberate, philosophical recognition that what the fire revealed, the foundation, the exposed truth of what was and was not working, is information that cannot be had any other way. Let me make this specific. The business that failed. What did it cost you that the successful continuation of that business would have cost you over the next decade? What did you know quietly wasn't working that the pressure maintaining it prevented you from acknowledging? The relationship that ended. What version of yourself were you maintaining within it that was slowly, invisibly, at significant cost? What was honest about your needs and desires that the relationship's continuation required you to suppress? The career that collapsed. How much of who you were inside it was authentically you, and how much was a performance required by a role that was never quite the right shape for who you actually are? I am not suggesting the fire was a gift. I am not suggesting you should have wanted it. I am suggesting that a more fatty, applied with genuine philosophical honesty, produces a specific insight that nothing else produces. The blank canvas is not just an absence, it is a permission. The permission to rebuild differently, to lay the foundation with full awareness of what the previous structure revealed about its weaknesses, to choose. Now, from this specific position of having lost investment in the old structure, the shape that actually fits who you are, people who have never lost everything live in constant, quiet fear the day they might. The fear occupies bandwidth. It shapes decisions toward the conservative, the safe, the maintenance of what exists over pursuit of what could be. You have already survived what they fear. And that survival, that specific, earned knowledge that you can stand in the ash and still be standing, is the most durable confidence available to a human being. Lesson 4. The 3-step rebuild protocol. Brick by brick, the architecture of return philosophy without practice is furniture without a house. Beautiful, possibly, but lacking the structure that makes it habitable. Let me give you the specific, sequential, practical rebuild protocol, drawn from both the Stoic tradition and modern psychology, for the period immediately following a significant loss. This protocol has 3 phases. Each phase is essential. Each phase builds on the previous one, and the order matters. Attempting phase 3 before phase 1 is complete is one of the most common and most costly mistakes people make in the aftermath of collapse. Phase 1, grounding. The nervous system after significant loss is in a specific physiological state. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep architecture. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, operating at high activation, scanning continuously for new threats in an environment that has just demonstrated its capacity for dramatic change. No significant, lasting rebuild can begin from this physiological state, not because you lack the willpower, but because the specific cognitive functions that building requires, long-term planning, creative problem-solving, the capacity to tolerate uncertainty while sustaining directed effort, are precisely the functions that chronic stress most severely impairs. The Stoic prescription for grounding is the morning sacred pause before checking any device, before engaging with any external demand, before allowing the world's assessment of your situation to enter your awareness. 10 minutes of complete silence, sitting, breathing, deliberately regulating the nervous system through the extended exhale practice. In for 4 counts, hold for 2, out for 6, which directly activates the parasympathetic nervous system and begins a physiological process of returning from threat response to problem-solving mode. Then, the dichotomy exercise, left column and right column, releasing what cannot be changed, orienting toward what can. Then one intention, not a plan, an intention. The character you are bringing to today, the quality of presence you are committing to. The sacred pause must come before every other action in the rebuild period, not because it produces immediate results, but because the quality of everything that follows depends entirely on the quality of the state from which it begins. Phase 2, radical humility. This phase addresses the ego problem of starting over, and it is the phase where the most well-intentioned rebuilders most often stumble. Starting over requires doing things that your previous level of achievement exempted you from doing. This is genuinely difficult, not because the tasks are beneath you. The Stoic tradition would reject that framing entirely, but because the ego that was constructed around the previous level of achievement will generate a specific kind of resistance. The resistance that says, people at my level don't do this. The resistance that says, I shouldn't have to start from here. The resistance that makes the necessary humble action feel like defeat rather than strategy. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, swept floors. Not literally, but he performed the philosophical equivalent in the way he examined and corrected himself in the private pages of his journal, with none of the exemptions his position entitled him to. Epictetus described the Stoic approach to humbling work with characteristic directness. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. The thing that is required right now, however far it sits from the position you previously occupied, is what is required. Meeting it with full, uncondescending, genuinely present effort is both the practical wisdom and the philosophical practice. Every piece of unglamorous work done with genuine care in the rebuild period is a philosophical act. It is the practice of separating your worth from your position, the training of a character that can do excellent work at any level, because the excellence comes from inside, not from the status of the task. Phase 3, microactions. This is the phase that breaks the paralysis of overwhelm, and it is the one most grounded in modern behavioral psychology. The scope of what needs to be rebuilt, viewed in its entirety, is almost always genuinely overwhelming. The career rebuilt from scratch, the financial security rebuilt from zero, the relationships rebuilt with new foundations, the identity rebuilt without the structures that previously defined it. Looking at all of this simultaneously, attempting to hold the full scope of the rebuild in view while trying to determine where to begin, produces a specific cognitive state that psychologists call task paralysis. The scale of what needs to be done makes it impossible to identify a starting point, so nothing starts. The Stoic prescription is radical simplicity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, as both a philosophical principle and a practical instruction, confine yourself to the present. Applied to the rebuild, not the entire mountain, not the summit, not even the next camp. The next step, just the next step, specific, executable today, small enough that completion is genuinely possible. What is the one thing, the single specific available action that moves you 1 millimeter in the right direction today? Not the comprehensive strategy, not the full plan. The next step, do that today. Just that. And tomorrow, the next step again. Days of single steps accumulated without drama, without the need for every step to be a breakthrough. These are what rebuild everything that has ever been rebuilt. Lesson 5. The stories that prove it. What the fire actually forges. History is not short of examples. But I want to give you 3 that are specific, documented, and genuinely illuminating. Because the proof that the Stoic reset is real must come from real lives. The first, Epictetus himself, born into slavery, deliberately physically damaged by his master, legally non-existent as a rights-bearing person for the first significant years of his adult life. The philosophical school he eventually built in Nicopolis, after being freed, after being expelled from Rome by Domitian, after every external structure of the life he might have had was unavailable to him, became the most influential philosophical institution of the era. His students included generals, senators, and eventually the Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself, who studied Epictetus' recorded teachings and returned to them for the rest of his life. The fire forged a teacher that the comfortable life would never have produced. The second, Nelson Mandela, 27 years imprisoned on Robben Island. His career, his freedom, his family life, his physical comfort, all of it taken in conditions specifically designed to break the will of political prisoners. And he emerged, not diminished, not bitter, not with the psychology of someone who had been merely surviving, but with the moral authority, the patient wisdom, and the specific quality of leadership that could hold a traumatized nation together through the most dangerous transition in its modern history. He said, in his own words, "I never lost hope that this great transformation would occur. I always knew that deep down in every human heart, there is mercy and generosity." 27 years of the Stoic reset, what emerged on the other side, had been made possible by nothing other than the fire. The third, Seneca himself, in his final hours. We have spoken of this before in this channel, but it belongs here in the context of the Stoic reset more than anywhere else. Order to die, everything external stripped entirely away. The wealth, the position, the career, the freedom, even the body itself about to be surrendered. Seneca continued to think, to speak, to teach, to maintain the character that decades of philosophical practice had built in him. What injures a sword, he once wrote, is what sharpens it. The reset had been running for his entire philosophical life. The accumulated losses, the exiles, the dangers, the grief, each one a moment of the fire, and from each fire, the character that met the next one. Let me guide you through the Stoic reset morning practice. Right now, together, 3 minutes. Sit, close your eyes. 1 slow breath. In for 4, hold for 2, out for 6. Now, think of the loss. Not to suffer, to see it clearly. What is on the left side of the page? What has already happened? What cannot be changed? Say internally, this is real. I am not fighting it. Now, what is on the right side? What is genuinely available to you today? Even one thing. Even one small, specific thing? Name it. Just one. Now, who do you want to be today and how you meet what comes? One word. Open your eyes. That word goes with you. The fire does not leave you where it found you. If you let it, if you apply the philosophy rather than merely surviving the flames, it leaves you somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that could not have been reached by any other route. Epictetus was free in ways his master never was. Mandela emerged from prison with authority no election could have given him. Seneca died with a composure that made his executioners witnesses to the thing they were trying to extinguish. The reset is not the return of what was. It is the emergence of what the fire made possible. What is one thing in your life right now that needs a Stoic reset? And what is the one step you are willing to take toward it today? Tell us in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.